in Mago Reddit. Today's story is
My narcissistic cousin almost killed my son. I had her arrested, and 3 months later she lost her family, her son, and her freedom. Full justice. I never thought that my cousin Ruth, 34, would endanger my son's life, and that when I confronted her about it, she would act as if she had done nothing wrong. Ruth's son celebrated his confirmation last weekend. The ceremony went smoothly, although it was long and a little tedious, to be honest, but within the norm. The real problem arose during the reception, which was held at the country club. While the adults were chatting and socializing inside, the children were playing outside in a designated area. During the event, I checked on Alex several times, and everything seemed to be in order. There were other adults supervising, so I wasn't worried about him. At no time did I notice anything out of the ordinary, and I never thought that Ruth would take him somewhere else. That's why I was surprised when Ruth pulled me aside to tell me that Alex had been behaving disrespectfully, talking back, and being rude to the event staff. This seemed strange to me because he has never misbehaved at family gatherings, and I found it hard to believe that he had suddenly started disrespecting adults. Before I could even ask what had happened, she waved her hand dismissively. She said, "Don't worry, I took care of the situation." I asked her where Alex was. Her response, accompanied by a smirk, left me frozen. "Oh, he's just taking a little break in the car for a moment." At first, I didn't understand what he meant. Then reality hit me and I understood what he had done. He had locked my son in the car. I didn't stop to argue. I didn't stop to ask why. I just ran. I left the building at full speed, my heart beating so hard I could hear the beats in my ears. The summer heat was overwhelming and suffocating. When I spotted my car in the parking lot, I feared the worst. The doors were locked, and, inside, Alex was crying desperately, soaked in sweat, his face completely red, his small hands frantically banging on the window as he gasped for breath. Panic took hold of me. I grabbed the handles and pulled with all my might, but the doors wouldn't give way. My fingers were shaking so much that I could barely hold the phone to call 911. It was then that Eric caught up with me. Seeing Alex trapped inside, he didn't hesitate for a second. He took a rock and broke the window of the passenger seat. The glass shattered, but at that moment nothing mattered other than getting my son out, because it wasn't even our car. I rushed over and pulled Alex out. His skin was burning to the touch. He'd been trapped in there for who knows how long in the scorching heat. By then, a crowd had formed around us. The country club staff quickly arrived, someone had called the paramedics. And finally, Ruth appeared. She looked annoyed, not guilty, not worried, just irritated that people were making a scene. And as if she hadn't done enough damage, she added something else to make the situation worse. Come on, he was only there for a few minutes, maybe now he'll learn not to be so spoiled. I'd never felt so angry in my life. My hands were shaking so much that I had to hold onto Eric's arm to stop myself from lunging at her. Eric was tense, as if he were ready to physically confront someone. He turned to Ruth and asked her if she had lost her mind. He told her that she could have killed Alex with her action. She had the audacity to reply, "It wasn't that hot. I left the window open a little," which was completely untrue. Eric seemed to be holding back his anger with great effort. The paramedics arrived and confirmed that Alex was suffering from heat exhaustion and dehydration. They immediately started to give him fluids and check his vital signs. They warned us that if we had found him later, the consequences could have been much more serious. And yet Ruth remained unmoved. She said, "They're so dramatic, my children would have been perfectly fine." I suggested that we could test it with her in one of the cars. Maybe that way we would see how resistant it was. She was so indignant that we decided to call the police. Ruth's confidence finally evaporated. Her husband rushed over to us, trying to calm the situation. He was equally contemptible, arguing that it had only been a parenting decision and that we were ruining a family event for the sake of a simple punishment. Eric told them they were sick if they considered locking a child in a hot car an appropriate form of discipline. Before the situation completely spiraled out of control, the police arrived. The officers took statements from us and several witnesses. When they heard Ruth admit that she had locked Alex in the car as punishment, the officers' expressions hardened. She was arrested immediately. Ruth's husband started shouting at the officers, insisting that it was absurd and reminding them that we were at his son's confirmation. One of the officers took Eric aside and strongly recommended that we press charges for endangering a minor. And so we will. Now Ruth's husband is trying to defend her, claiming that I am destroying the family. My aunt and Ruth's sisters are calling me a horrible person for involving the police. I don't care. Ruth locked my son in a car in 32-degree heat. He deserves to face the full consequences of his actions. Edit. First of all, I want to thank you for all the support and outrage expressed on Alex's behalf. I've noticed that some people have asked about certain details of the story, so I'd like to clarify them here. 1. How did Ruth have access to my car? Some people were confused about how Ruth managed to lock Alex in our car. I should have explained better. It wasn't our car. It was Ruth's car, so she had her own keys. That's why I didn't mind Eric breaking her window either. 2. Why didn't Alex open the door from the inside? Many people asked why Alex didn't just open the door. The truth is that he tried. Ruth activated the child lock on the back doors before putting him in the car. Alex was completely trapped. The front doors were also locked, and he was too scared to think clearly. 3. How long was he in the car? We don't have an exact time, but based on the last time I saw Alex playing and the time we found him, it was between 15 and 20 minutes. It may not seem like a long time, but in a car, without air conditioning, with an outside temperature above 30 degrees, it was enough for him to start to overheat severely. The paramedics warned us that if more time had passed, the consequences could have been much worse, possibly heat stroke. 4. Why didn't anyone else help? This is what angers me the most. There were people outside, but nobody realized what was happening. The parking lot was separated from the event area, and since Ruth barely opened the window, Alex's screams weren't audible enough. It wasn't until Eric and I ran out, screaming desperately, that people turned their attention in that direction. 5. Was this really a crime that warranted arrest? Absolutely. The police did not hesitate to arrest Ruth after hearing what she did. She admitted to the officers that she locked Alex in the car as punishment. She never denied it. Due to the extreme heat, the length of the confinement, and Alex's critical medical condition, the act was classified as endangering a minor. That is why she was arrested immediately. 6. Why is the family defending her? This is the hardest thing to explain. My family has always treated Ruth in a special way. She is what many in the comments identified as the golden girl. Even after endangering my son's life, there were people who protected her. At this point, I no longer care what the rest of the family thinks. Ruth did not make a simple mistake. She made a deliberate decision that could have had fatal consequences for my son. I hope this clears up any doubts. At the end of the day, nothing justifies what Ruth did. Neither family loyalty nor an excuse about discipline can justify what happened. She put my son's life at risk, and now she will have to face the consequences. I am going to press ahead with the charges, and I am not going to back down no matter how much my family begs me. Update 1. Ruth spent the night in jail. Today she was released on bail, and a date has already been set for the hearing on the charges of endangering a minor. The consequences of her actions were immediate, but not in the way I expected. I naively thought that, after being arrested, she would at least show some remorse, that she would understand how close she came to causing serious harm to a child, and feel at least a modicum of guilt. But instead, she dug in even more. Her family went into full defense mode as soon as she was released on bail. Her husband started calling all the family members, insisting that this had all been blown out of proportion and that I was just an overprotective mother. At no point did he apologize to me for what his wife did, and instead claimed that she was only doing this because I didn't know how to be hard on a child, something he said I lacked as a mother. My aunt wants me to drop the charges, arguing that, although she may have made a small mistake, she shouldn't destroy his life over it. A mistake. That's how they're describing what happened. Locking my son in a car at 32 degrees, leaving him until he was red, crying and dehydrated, was not a mistake. It was child abuse. I will not allow myself to be manipulated into thinking otherwise. At first, I ignored her calls and messages because, no matter what they do, I will stand by my charges. But Ruth took to social media to tell her distorted version of events. She wasn't recounting what really happened, but a version in which she was being punished unjustly. She claimed that I had only disciplined my son, without specifying exactly what the punishment was, and that I was making up stories to ruin his life. Something I was no longer going to tolerate. A week after the incident, another family gathering was scheduled, the birthday of one of my younger cousins. I had no intention of attending, but when I found out that Ruth and her husband would be there, promoting their distorted version of events, I made a decision. If they wanted to manipulate the narrative, I would put a stop to it. Eric hesitated about my attendance, but he knew me well enough to understand that I needed to do it, not just for myself, but for Alex. Because one day he would hear different versions of what happened, and I wanted to make sure that the truth was clear and undeniable. When I arrived, I could feel the tension in the air immediately. Some family members looked at me uncomfortably, not knowing what position to take. Others ignored me completely, which indicated to me that they were on Ruth's side. And Ruth, sitting in the corner with her usual smile, seemed completely calm. She had convinced several people with her deception, so she believed she had already won this battle. But I told them all that we needed to talk, and I related the real version of events. There were family members who were present that day, but they didn't arrive at the parking lot until after we rescued Alex. Other family members didn't attend for various reasons, so they thought that I had only verbally confronted her, and that's why we were in conflict. But when I revealed what really happened, there was no doubt left, and loyalties began to shift. More precisely, those who supported Ruth began to reconsider their position. Some turned pale, realizing that they had been backing the wrong side. But I didn't stop there. I took out the medical report, the official document detailing Alex's condition, confirming dehydration, elevated body temperature, and severe emotional distress. I read it out loud, leaving no detail out. Ruth left the room in a rage. After that night, perceptions changed completely. Ruth and her husband stopped presenting themselves as victims because they no longer had a way of sustaining their lie. The relatives who had initially supported her remained silent, either out of shame or because they finally understood the gravity of what had happened. But most importantly, no one believed Ruth's falsehoods anymore. And this is not over yet. I have decided to take civil action against her, in addition to the criminal charges she already faces. Ruth thinks she can pass herself off as a victim, but let her try it in court and see how she gets on. There she won't be able to tell her manipulated version of events while omitting crucial details. It will be interesting to see if she keeps that mocking smile on her face in front of the judge too. Update 2. From the day I had Ruth arrested, I knew that I would take this matter to its logical conclusion, no matter how many family members tried to intervene or minimize the seriousness of what had happened. Ruth's trial was disastrous for her. She tried to present herself as a victim. She cried in court, claiming that she never wanted to hurt Alex, that she was only trying to teach him a lesson, that she thought she had left the window open enough, and that she was only going to leave him there for a brief moment until he calmed down. But it was her own previous statements that damaged her case. There were witnesses who confirmed that no window was open and that she continued to show indifference after the seriousness of the situation became evident. Even then, she continued to maintain that maybe now he would learn not to be so spoiled. Her entire defense collapsed. She was found guilty of endangering a minor. She did not receive a prison sentence, but she was given probation, mandatory classes in responsible parenting, and most significantly, a restraining order. She was officially prohibited from going anywhere near Alex. That should have been the end of the whole matter, except that Alex is my son and I wasn't finished. The criminal case was one thing, but I wanted consequences that would have a real and permanent impact on her. Alex suffered nightmares for weeks. He refused to go anywhere without my presence or that of my husband. He had recurring dreams where he was locked in dark spaces with no possibility of escape. So I took Ruth and her husband to civil court. I sued them for emotional distress, medical expenses, and punitive damages. Her husband, the same one who had been ranting on social media about how I was destroying Ruth's life, suddenly changed his attitude. He begged me to reach an out-of-court settlement, offering to negotiate financial compensation to end the matter. I refused outright. I wanted this case to go to trial. I wanted every detail of Ruth's actions to be exposed to the judge. And finally, I was victorious. The monetary amount, which exceeds $50,000, is not the most important thing, but the precedent set by this lawsuit is. If she ever considers doing something similar to Alex or any other child, she will have to think twice. Update 3. Several months have passed since Ruth was convicted of endangering a minor, and the full extent of her actions has been revealed. I had hoped that, after all that had happened, she would disappear from the public radar and reflect on her actions. Unfortunately, that has not happened. She does not seem to feel any remorse, even as her life continues to deteriorate. Perhaps after so many setbacks, one might realize that something is wrong, recognizing that karma is responding to their actions. But in Ruth's case, she remains convinced that the universe is wrong, not her. The most devastating consequence of Ruth's behavior was not the loss of her reputation, nor even the dissolution of her marriage, but the traumatic effect her actions had on her own son, Seth. For weeks after the incident, Seth became introverted and withdrawn. His father, now Ruth's ex-husband, has revealed that he began to have nightmares about what happened with Alex, and, even worse, he developed a fear that his mother might subject him to a similar treatment. Why? You see, Seth was present that day. He witnessed everything with his own eyes. He saw Alex crying desperately, struggling to breathe. And he also saw how his mother acted with total indifference. For the mind of a child like Seth, such cruelty from his mother is incomprehensible. He began to ask disturbing questions. Why did Mommy do that? And would she ever lock me in a car if I misbehave? I'm sure Ruth tried to minimize the situation by telling Seth that he is not like Alex, and that he would never deserve such a punishment. In the end, it was not only Alex who was emotionally scarred, but also Ruth's own son, the child she claimed to want to protect and love unconditionally. Seth could not overcome the trauma and began to actively reject his mother, avoiding contact and distancing himself whenever she tried to console him. When Ruth's ex-husband observed how the child reacted to his mother's presence, it was the last straw. Yes, the same person who initially thought that his wife was just teaching a necessary lesson. But when it came to the emotional safety of his own son, he was no longer so convinced. Especially when he saw the psychological consequences of that form of discipline, even if it had not been applied directly to Seth. He filed for full custody of Seth, and, to Ruth's dismay, the court ruled in his favor. And sure enough, Ruth tried to change the narrative again, claiming that her husband was the one who abused Seth, and that was why she wanted a divorce. But by now, most of us know how to tell the truth from her lies. We have spent time with Seth, who has shared his own version of events. Ruth, despite all her claims to be an exemplary mother, something completely implausible, can now only see her son under professional supervision. And Seth flatly refuses to even consider that option. The divorce was finalized shortly afterwards, with her ex-husband completely cutting off all contact with her. Nobody in his social circle wanted to have anything to do with Ruth, and he eventually moved in with Seth to start a new life elsewhere. I hope that his distancing himself from Ruth will free him from the toxic influence she exerted. I don't know for sure, but at least he seems to have recognized the reality of the situation. I hope this represents a positive change, mainly for Seth's well-being. And Ruth finds herself completely alone. Not only is she unemployed and friendless, but she is also totally estranged from most of the family. Nobody wants to have anything to do with her, and the few who still speak to her are probably just waiting for the next scandal she'll be involved in. I thought I was finally done with her. I really believed it. But a few weeks ago, Ruth showed up unexpectedly at my door. I was outside with Alex when I saw her car pull up. I stood my ground and immediately called the police before ordering her to leave. Ruth came out of her car completely furious, looking like someone who hadn't slept for days. And she immediately started shouting, hurling all kinds of insults. "You ruined my life," she yelled. "You turned my son against me." She had the nerve to claim that I was responsible for her losing her marriage and her family. Alex, who was standing next to me, instantly hid behind me and began to tremble visibly. I asked him to go inside the house and stay there, but it was clear that he was affected by the unexpected reappearance of his aunt. That was the moment when I completely lost my patience. I took a step forward and said firmly, "You brought this on yourself, Ruth. Now, leave my property immediately, because if you stay here for 1 second longer, it is possible that the police who are on their way will come to arrest you again." Her expression changed from anger to absolute disbelief, as if she could not accept that I was no longer afraid of her, and that I was completely willing to take all necessary measures to protect my son. She said she didn't believe that she had really called the authorities, even though she had done so before, but I suggested that she stay a little longer to find out for herself. She left in a rage, but not before shouting, "This isn't over!" But in reality, it was over, because from the moment she broke the restraining order, she sealed her legal fate. To begin with, Ruth finds herself without a job, without friends, and without contact with most of her family. Her reputation is completely destroyed, and no one defends her anymore. Every time her name comes up at a family gathering, people change the subject or make derogatory comments about her. It is as if she has become a person completely excluded from the community. Her ex-husband moved in with Seth, obtaining full custody, because the boy is basically afraid of his own mother. The situation is extremely unfavorable for her in every respect. And as if that weren't enough, she was arrested again for violating the restraining order. This game she thinks she is playing with me has come to an end. Not only has she lost, but she has also been publicly humiliated. It is time for her to face the reality of her situation. It has been a traumatic setback for Alex to see her aunt again, but we hope she won't have to see her for a long time, which will contribute to her healing process. She is receiving professional help for those who ask about her condition. We are confident that it is only a matter of time before Alex shows significant improvement. But if that improvement requires Ruth to remain at a distance and not by her own choice, then as a mother I will make sure that is the case. Update 4. My primary responsibility as a mother is to protect my son, and that is precisely what I have done by enforcing the restraining order, even if it intensifies a situation that none of us would have wanted. We filed a new complaint against Ruth, and, due to her breach of the court order, she will have to serve approximately 3 months in prison. We consulted with a lawyer to assist us with the complaint, with the intention of including the threat and other aggravating elements so that Ruth would receive a more severe sentence or a longer period of imprisonment. However, the judge ruled that, as this was a first offense of the order and there had been no direct physical aggression against Alex, the sentence did not warrant more than 3 months. He even mentioned that, in some similar cases, first offenses are often punished only with a financial fine. I wonder then how effective a restraining order really is in practice. We have 3 months to prepare before her release because we know that the prison experience will not change Ruth's behavior, and there is a possibility that she will show signs of increased aggression. If she has shown erratic behavior during these months, I don't want to imagine the impact that imprisonment could have on her mental state. Our lawyer has put us in touch with a specialist in cases of family violence to identify the best strategy to mitigate any potential risk that this woman may represent in the future. To be completely honest, I feel afraid at the moment because I don't know what Ruth might be capable of from now on. And the absence of a judicial system that really takes strong measures only increases my uncertainty and concern. Despite everything, my resolve remains firm. Eric and I will protect Alex at whatever cost is necessary, no matter how difficult or costly this process may be. Update 5. These months of preparation and planning have proven unnecessary, but at least they gave me some peace of mind in feeling that we had everything under control. We have implemented various preventative measures to ensure that Ruth could not cause us harm, although I prefer not to detail which ones specifically in case she ever reads this account. Fortunately, it has not been necessary to activate any of these protocols because Ruth has decided to move away. I wouldn't say to the opposite end of the country, but almost as far as that. It's a sad and regrettable outcome, but in Ruth's case, it represents what is fair and necessary for the well-being of everyone else. However, in this specific situation, her departure has been the best thing for our peace of mind. The restraining order is still in place, she is practically unable to see her son, and the vast majority of the family has completely cut off contact with her. In fact, at this point I would say that absolutely the whole family has done so, because even her own mother has expressed that this is the best decision Ruth could have made. As for Alex, these months, without hearing anything from Ruth, have benefited him enormously. And when we told him that she had left, possibly for good, I could sense that his sense of relief was even deeper. I sincerely hope that this is the real end of our story, and that I won't have to come back to report that Ruth has returned to this city. In any case, we are maintaining the security measures against her, and violating a restraining order again should carry more severe consequences than the first offense.